Of all the sounds we recognize in our lives, perhaps none are more comforting than a familiar voice. A parent calling from another room, a friend greeting us across a parking lot, a spouse asking if we remember to lock the door, a child calling from the backyard. We spend our entire lives learning the voices of the people we love, their tones, their rhythms, the way they say our names, the way they sound when they're tired, excited, worried, or trying not to laugh. A familiar voice can make us feel safe before we have even turned around, which raises a disturbing question. What if one day something else learned it? Welcome to The Hollow Between, a podcast of folklore, ghost stories, and the uncanny. I'm Candace, and tonight, beside the lantern light, I have a story for you. So settle in with a blanket and a cup of something warm. And if you hear someone call your name from somewhere you can't see, perhaps wait before answering. There are warnings that appear across generations. Simple warnings, practical warnings, the sort of advice passed from grandparents to grandchildren without much explanation. Don't whistle after dark. Don't follow strange lights. Don't answer knocks when no one is there. And in many places, especially in mountain communities with old rural traditions, there's another warning. If you hear someone call your name from the woods, don't answer. Sometimes the warning says not to whistle back. Sometimes it says not to follow. Sometimes it simply says keep walking. No explanation, no story, just the rule. Maybe that's what makes such warnings so unsettling. When someone gives us a reason, we can argue with it. When no reason is given, our imagination fills in the rest. Stories of mimicking voices appear in many forms. Sometimes the voice comes from the woods, from a mother, a brother, a friend, someone who should not be there. Sometimes it comes from another room in the house, a familiar call from the hallway, a loved one saying your name from the kitchen. Only when you go looking, you find that person asleep upstairs, or not home at all. Sometimes the imitation is not a voice, but a person, a figure seen at the end of a hallway, a loved one glimpsed from across the street, a friend waving somewhere they could not possibly be. These stories often share the same quiet terror. Not that something unknown is present, but that something unknown is wearing the familiar. Folklore has long understood the danger of imitation. In old stories, travelers are often misled by voices, lights, music, or figures that seem almost human. In doppelganger traditions, a person's double might appear as an omen, a warning, or a sign that something was terribly wrong. In modern urban legends, people hear loved ones calling from basements, forests, stairwells, parking lots, or darkened rooms. The setting changes, but the fear does not. Something sounds like someone you trust, and for one vulnerable moment, you believe it. It's worth saying that not every tradition involving mimicry should be treated casually. Some stories carry meanings far deeper than internet legend or campfire entertainment. And for that reason, tonight, we are staying with the broader folkloric pattern. The voice that calls from the dark. The thing that imitates. The warning not to answer. Because that warning appears again and again. Across places, across generations, across stories, and perhaps the reason is simple. A voice is an invitation. A voice asks us to respond. And when the voice is familiar, the invitation becomes much harder to refuse. There's also a psychological side to this. Human beings are remarkably good at recognizing voices. We can identify people we love after hearing only a few words, sometimes only a breath, a laugh, a certain way of saying hello. Our brains are built to find patterns and meaning in sound. That ability helps us connect. It helps us survive. But it can also unsettle us, because sometimes we think we hear our name in noise, in the wind, in water, in a crowd, in the hum of a house late at night. Most of the time, the explanation is ordinary, a coincidence, a trick of sound, the brain searching for meaning, and yet the experience can still feel deeply strange. Because hearing your name when no one has called it is different from seeing a shadow. It feels personal, as though something noticed you, as though something wanted you to turn around. This, I think, is the unsettling power of mimic stories. They take something we trust completely and make it uncertain. They ask us to imagine a world in which not every familiar voice belongs to the person we love. A world in which the thing calling from the trees, the hallway, the alley, or the other side of the fence knows exactly how to make us listen. A knock asks to enter your home, but a voice asks to enter your mind. And sometimes, folklore tells us, the safest thing we can do is remain silent. So draw a little closer to the lantern light and let me share with you tonight's story, The Voice Beyond the Fence. Emily Harper first heard the voice on a Tuesday evening in July. She was walking home from work along her usual route, one hand wrapped around an iced coffee gone mostly watery, the other holding her phone. The city was still warm from the day. Heat rose from the sidewalk. Car engines hummed at traffic lights, and somewhere above her, an air conditioner dripped steadily from a third-floor window. Emily lived in an older neighborhood on the east side of the city. Not trendy, not dangerous, just old. Brick apartment buildings, corner stores, mature maple trees lifting the sidewalks with their roots, porches crowded with plants, dogs barking from behind chain-link gates. The kind of neighborhood where people knew each other's routines more than their names. Emily liked it a lot. She liked the ordinary rhythm of it. The same bus sighing to a stop at 6th Street, the same man sweeping outside the laundromat, the same woman watering geraniums on the second-floor balcony, the same shortcut beside the vacant lot. And that was where she heard it. Emily? She stopped. The voice had come from the other side of the chain-link fence. At least she thought it had. The lot was narrow, squeezed between an abandoned brick warehouse. The lot was narrow and overgrown, squeezed between an abandoned brick warehouse and a row of garages tagged with old graffiti. Tall weeds pushed through cracked concrete. A rusted shopping cart leaned on its side near the back wall. Plastic bags clung to the fence like trapped birds. Emily looked through the chain links. Hello? Nothing. The lot stood empty. Traffic moved behind her. A bicycle bell chimed somewhere down the block. She waited another second, then shook her head. Probably someone on the sidewalk. Probably someone calling to a different Emily. Cities were full of borrowed sounds. She continued home and forgot about it by dinner. The next evening she heard it again. The same place, the same stretch of fence, the same voice. Emily? This time she turned immediately. No one stood behind her. No one leaned from a window. No one moved inside the vacant lot. The weeds stood motionless in the late-day heat. Emily frowned. Who's there? The words slipped out before she could stop them. No answer came. only the distant rush of traffic and the low buzz of insects from somewhere in the weeds. She stepped closer to the fence. The lot smelled like hot metal, dust, and old rainwater. "Hello?" A pigeon burst from the roofline of the warehouse. Emily jumped, then laughed at herself. "Great," she muttered, scared by a pigeon, very dignified. She walked home faster than usual. That night, while brushing her teeth, she remembered something her grandfather had said when she was little. She couldn't remember the exact year. Maybe she had been 9, maybe 10. They had been sitting on the back steps of his house while he repaired a broken screen door. He had been the kind of man who gave advice without announcing it as advice. He would say things while fixing hinges, sharpening tools, or pulling weeds from the garden. Small rules, practical things. Never walk into a dark room without knowing how you'll get back out. Never trust a ladder on soft ground. Never leave a candle burning near curtains. And then one day, without looking up from the screwdriver in his hand, he had said, "Emily." She had looked over. "What, Grandpa?" "If someone ever calls your name and you can't see who's doing the calling," he paused to tighten a screw, "keep walking." Emily had laughed. Why? Her grandfather finally looked at her. His expression had been serious enough that she stopped smiling. "Because some things are hoping you'll answer." That was all he said. No story, no explanation, just the rule. At the time, Emily thought he was being dramatic. But now, standing in her bathroom 15 years after his funeral, toothbrush in hand, she felt the memory settle uneasily behind her ribs. The third time came after dark. Emily had stayed late at the design studio finishing a client presentation and did not reach her neighborhood until nearly 9 p.m. The heat had softened, but the city still held the day in its bricks. Street lights glowed through the trees. A bus hissed at the corner and pulled away. The sidewalk beside the vacant lot lay mostly empty. Emily considered crossing to the other side of the street, then felt immediately ridiculous. It was a fence, a vacant lot, a voice she had probably imagined. She kept walking, and then halfway along the fence, she heard her brother. "Em?" Emily stopped so quickly her key slipped from her hand and struck the sidewalk. Her brother, Nathan, lived in Oregon. He had a dry, easy voice that she could recognize instantly, and he had called her Em since they were children. The voice came again. "Em?" From the lot, from somewhere behind the weeds. Emily stared through the fence, and her pulse began to climb. "Nathan?" The name nearly left her mouth. Nearly. Then she heard her grandfather's voice in memory. "If somebody ever calls your name and you can't see who's doing the calling." Emily bent slowly, picked up her keys, and kept walking. The voice did not call again. But as she reached the corner, she heard something behind her. Not footsteps, not exactly, but something moving lightly through the weeds, matching her pace. Stopping when she stopped, continuing when she continued. She didn't turn around. The next morning, Emily called Nathan. He answered on the third ring. "Hey, Em, everything okay?" The sound of his real voice made her knees weak with relief. "Yeah," she said quickly. "Yeah, I just wanted to hear your voice." There was a pause. "That's ominous," he said. She laughed because she was supposed to. They talked for a few minutes. Work, weather, their mother's birthday next month, normal things. She did not tell him what she had heard. The moment she imagined saying it aloud, she realized how it would sound. "Last night I heard your voice coming from a vacant lot." No, absolutely not. Some experiences become less believable the moment they leave your mouth. For 3 days, nothing happened. Emily stopped taking the shortcut anyway. She walked the long way home past the pharmacy and the public library. It added 8 minutes to her route, 8 perfectly reasonable minutes. She told herself the change was practical. Better lighting, more people, fewer weeds. By Friday, she began to feel foolish again. And by Sunday, she had almost convinced herself the entire thing had been stress. By Monday, she used the shortcut. At first, nothing happened. The evening was bright. Children played basketball half a block away. A woman walked a dachshund wearing a tiny red harness. Someone had painted over part of the graffiti on the warehouse wall. The city felt ordinary again. Emily relaxed. Then, from beyond the fence, her mother said, "Sweetheart?" Emily went cold. Her mother was alive. Her mother lived 20 minutes away. But that was not what frightened her. What frightened her was the voice. Not just her mother's voice, a specific version of it. The soft, careful tone she used when Emily was sick as a child. When she brought ginger ale and saltine crackers to the bedroom. When she touched Emily's forehead with the back of her hand. "Sweetheart?" The word trembled slightly. Exactly right. Emily felt tears spring to her eyes before she could stop them. That was the cruelest part. Not the fear, not at first, but the longing. Body reacts to a beloved voice before the mind can protect itself. She gripped the strap of her bag and kept walking. The voice followed, not moving closer, not farther, just keeping pace from the other side of the fence. "Sweetheart, wait." Emily did not wait. "Emily, please." She walked faster. Near the corner, the voice changed. Not dramatically, slightly. A seam showing in fabric. A note played too flat. The sweetness thin. The final words stretched a little too long. "Please." Emily crossed the street without looking back. That night she dreamed of the vacant lot. In the dream, she stood before the fence while voices called from inside. Her mother, her brother, an old co-worker, a teacher from middle school, a woman she had not thought about in years. Each voice called her name from the weeds, not pleading, not threatening, but practicing. Emily woke before dawn with her heart pounding. Outside her bedroom window, the city was gray and quiet, and for one terrible moment, she thought she heard whispering from the alley below, a chorus of voices, soft, patient, trying different tones. Then a garbage truck groaned at the end of the block, and the sound vanished. After that, the voices became clever. They stopped calling only her name. One evening, as she passed the fence at a distance from the opposite sidewalk, a voice called, "You dropped your keys." Emily froze. She looked down. Her keys lay on the sidewalk behind her. She hadn't heard them fall. From the vacant lot came the same voice. Not her brother now, not her mother, but her own. "You dropped your keys." Emily stared at the keys, then at the lot across the street. The fence glinted beneath the street lights. No one stood there. No one could have seen, unless they had been watching. She picked up the keys and walked home without taking her eyes off the ground ahead. The next day, she bought pepper spray. The day after that, she bought a small camera for her apartment door. Neither helped. The voice was never at her apartment, never in the hallway, never outside her window, but always at the fence, always the lot, always that boundary between ordinary sidewalk and something overgrown, abandoned, and waiting. For a week, she avoided the block entirely. Then one evening, after heavy rain flooded several streets, She was forced to pass it again. The lot smelled of wet weeds and rust. Puddles shone among the cracked concrete. Emily quickened her pace. Halfway along the fence, a voice said, "You're going the wrong way." She stopped. The voice was not her mother's or her brother's. It wasn't her own. It was her grandfather's. Emily's hand tightened around the pepper spray in her pocket. The voice came again, calm, matter of fact, the way he had sounded while fixing the screen door. "You're going the wrong way." Emily closed her eyes. No, that's not possible. Her grandfather had been dead for 15 years. She still remembered the smell of his garage, motor oil, sawdust, peppermints in the glove box of his old truck. His voice had lived so clearly in memory that she could almost bear hearing it. Almost. "Emily," the voice softened. "You ought to come here a minute." Her eyes opened. The lot stood dark beyond the fence. The weeds moved silently, though there was no wind. Emily's lips parted. Every part of her wanted to say, "Grandpa?" The word rose in her throat, warm, automatic. Then she remembered his rule. If somebody ever calls your name and you can't see who's doing the calling. She swallowed the words. She turned and walked away. Behind her, her grandfather's voice changed, just slightly. "Well," it said, "that's disappointing." Emily stopped sleeping well after that. She began taking ride shares home from work. She avoided the neighborhood after dark. She told herself she would move when her lease ended in September. Then August arrived, heavy and airless, the kind of heat that makes cities feel feverish. Trash cans smelled sharper, storm drains breathed damp air. People argued more loudly at intersections, and through it all, that vacant lot waited. Emily could feel it even from blocks away. That was ridiculous, of course. A lot could not wait. A fence could not listen. And yet every route through the neighborhood seemed to bend toward it. Every evening, she found herself checking over her shoulder, listening, always listening. The last time Emily took the shortcut, she did by accident. A late meeting, a dead phone battery, construction on 7th Street, rain threatening but not yet falling. She turned the corner out of habit and found herself beside the fence before she realized where she was. The street was empty, the basketball court dark, the warehouse windows black. Emily stopped. The vacant lot lay on her left, the chain link fence running beside her like a warning. For several seconds, nothing happened. No voice, no movement, no sound except distant traffic and the buzz of a failing streetlight. Then, from somewhere inside the lot, her own voice said, "Emily?" She could not move. It was not merely similar. It was exact. The same slight rasp at the end of the word, the same uncertain lift, the same breath. It was the voice she heard in recordings and disliked because it sounded too exposed, too personal, too much like a version of herself she did not control. "Emily?" The voice came again, closer to the fence now. She stared into the weeds and something shifted. Not a shape, not a figure, only darkness moving differently than the darkness around it. Emily backed away, and the voice spoke again, still hers. "You know you want to answer." Her breath caught. The words were not loud, not threatening. They were almost gentle. "You've wanted to answer every time." Emily shook her head. The streetlight above her flickered. The fence cast thin shadows across the sidewalk. From inside the lot, the voice continued. "Your brother, your mother, your grandfather." A pause. "We did well with him, didn't we?" Emily's eyes filled with tears. The darkness beyond the fence seemed to gather itself. Something moved through the weeds, closer, still unseen. Only the voice came through clearly. Her voice, soft, patient. "Say something." Emily stood perfectly still, and then the rain began. A few drops at first, then more. Water tapped the pavement, the fence, the leaves. The voice whispered, "Please." And that was when Emily finally understood. It did not need her to follow. It needed her to respond. One word, one acknowledgement, one thread between them. She thought of her grandfather's hands repairing the screen door, the smell of sawdust, his voice, real and ordinary, giving her a rule without explanation. Keep walking," she said to herself. Emily stepped backward, then again, then turned and walked away. She didn't run. Running felt like panic. Walking felt like obedience. Behind her, the voice said nothing, not at first. Then, just as she reached the corner, her own voice called after her. "Good." Emily stopped. Every muscle in her body went cold. The voice from the lot lowered to a whisper. "You're finally listening." Emily moved 3 weeks later. Different neighborhood, different routine, different walk home. No vacant lot, no chain link fence. And for a while, life became ordinary again. Emily bought new curtains, found a coffee shop she liked, learned the names of the neighbors' dogs, and she slept through the night, mostly. Sometimes in crowded places, she thought she heard her name. But cities are full of names, full of voices, full of echoes, and she had learned not to turn too quickly. 6 months later, Emily was leaving a grocery store just after sunset. The parking lot was busy, cars pulling in and out, carts rattling across the asphalt, a child crying near the entrance, someone laughing by the cart return. Perfectly ordinary. Emily unlocked her car and placed 2 grocery bags in the back seat. Then someone behind her said, "Emily?" She froze. For one brief second, she almost turned. The voice had been close, only a few feet away, but something about it stopped her. Not because it was unfamiliar, because it was not. It was her own voice, quiet and careful, exactly the way she sounded when she was trying not to startle someone. Emily stood with one hand on the open car door. The parking lot continued around her. Engines, footsteps, a shopping cart rattling over uneven pavement. No one screamed. No one ran. No one else seemed to have heard anything at all. Her grandfather's voice returned to her so clearly it might have been spoken beside her. "If somebody ever calls your name and you can't see who's doing the calling." Emily got into the car and closed the door. She locked it. Only then did she look in the rearview mirror. At first, she saw nothing unusual. A woman loading groceries, a man returning a cart, the glow of the store windows behind them. Then, near the edge of the lot, beneath a street light that had not yet fully come on, she saw herself. Not clearly, not enough to make sense of it. Just a figure standing beside the cart return, wearing the same coat, same hair, same stillness. Emily stopped breathing. The figure did not move. It simply stood there, watching her car. Then its mouth opened. Across the lot, through the closed windows and the ordinary noise of the city, Emily heard her own voice whisper, "Good. You're finally listening." Emily started the engine with shaking hands. She drove away without looking back. And from that night on, whenever someone called her name in a parking lot, on a sidewalk, in a hallway, or from another room, Emily waited. She looked first, and only then, if she could see who was speaking, did she answer. Perhaps that is why mimic stories endure. Not because we know what waits beyond the fence, not because we can prove every strange voice in the dark belongs to something uncanny, but because the fear itself is so intimate. These stories ask us to question something we rarely question: the comfort of being called, the safety of a familiar voice, the instinct to turn when someone says our name. A shadow may frighten us, and a knock may unsettle us, but a voice we love can pull us toward danger before we have time to think. And perhaps that is the warning hidden inside these stories. Not every familiar sound is safe. Not every voice deserves an answer. We spend our lives learning the voices of people we know and love. We rarely stop to wonder who else might be listening. Please send your stories to thehollowbetween@gmail.com. Perhaps your story might be shared here beside the lantern light. And if you've been enjoying The Hollow Between, I would be so grateful if you followed the podcast and shared it with someone who loves folklore, ghost stories, and the uncanny as much as we do. Word of mouth truly helps keep little lanterns like this burning and helps this strange little community continue to grow. Thank you so much, friends, for spending this evening with me. And until next time, mind the hollow between. While many of the traditions, places, and legends discussed in tonight's episode are rooted in folklore, the featured narrative was created for The Hollow Between.